The surgical lamp swung wildly as Elena's blood-soaked hands fought to clamp the severed artery. Thomas Reed's life slipping away with each heartbeat while Vincent Cross watched from the shadows, his voice cutting through her panic like ice. If he dies, Dr. Martinez, you've failed your first real test. And if you're already hooked and want to see how a simple act of honesty trapped this medical student in a web she could never escape, do me a favor. Hit that like button, subscribe, and tell me where you're watching from, because this story gets darker before it gets any light, and you won't want to miss a single twist. The fluorescent lights of Rose's diner buzzed like dying insects at 2:30 in the morning, casting sickly yellow pools across cracked vinyl booths and a checkerboard floor that had seen better decades. Elena Martinez moved through her closing routine with the mechanical precision of someone who'd performed these same motions 1,000 times, her body operating on autopilot while her mind wrestled with the pharmacology flashcards she'd been studying between the dinner rush and the lonely stragglers who nursed cold coffee until closing time. At 24, she'd become intimate with exhaustion in ways most people never experience, the kind of bone-deep weariness that makes your teeth ache and your vision blur at the edges. She was the type of person who smiled at strangers not because life had been kind to her, but because her abuela had taught her that bitterness was a poison you mixed for yourself, and Elena refused to drink it no matter how bitter the cup life handed her. She'd been on her feet for 11 hours straight, a double shift because Maria had called in sick again, which probably meant Maria had another interview, which probably meant Elena would be picking up even more shifts when Maria inevitably quit for something better. Not that Elena blamed her. Rose's diner paid minimum wage plus tips that barely covered bus fare, and the overnight crowd wasn't exactly known for their generosity. But Elena needed every dollar, every single crumpled bill and handful of coins, because Seattle Pacific University's nursing program didn't care that she was working herself into the ground. They wanted their tuition money, and they wanted it on time, and if she couldn't pay, there were 50 other desperate students ready to take her spot. The anatomy textbook lay open on the counter next to the coffee maker, its pages dotted with highlighter marks and coffee stains, a roadmap of her desperate attempt to cram 4 years of knowledge into whatever fractured moments she could steal between orders. She was studying the cardiovascular system tonight, ventricles and aortas, the intricate machinery of the human heart, and the irony wasn't lost on her that she was learning how hearts pumped blood, while her own felt like it might give out from sheer exhaustion. Elena wiped down the last booth, number 7, tucked in the back corner where the light was dimmest and the privacy was greatest, when her rag caught on something wedged between the cracked vinyl seat and the wall. She pulled it free, expecting another forgotten phone or cheap sunglasses, the usual detritus of forgetful customers. Instead, her fingers closed around buttersoft leather, expensive and weighty in a way that made her breath catch. The wallet was black, Italian leather if she had to guess, the kind of thing that cost more than she made in a month. She glanced toward the front windows out of instinct, but the street was empty, the last customer having left 40 minutes ago, a businessman in a sharp charcoal suit who drunk 3 espressos and left a 20% tip that had felt like Christmas morning. Elena turned the wallet over in her hands, feeling the quality of it, the way it spoke of a different world than the one she inhabited. She shouldn't open it. She should put it in the lost and found box under the register and let whoever owned it come back for it. That's what her abuela would tell her to do. That's what the right thing was. But Elena's fingers were already finding the wallet's edge, already flipping it open, and what she saw inside made her knees weak enough that she had to sit down in booth 7, sliding into the still warm seat where the businessman had been sitting.
Cash.
Stacks of it, bundled in crisp hundreds. Her hands trembling, Elena counted once, then again because she couldn't believe the number. $3,800. More money than she'd seen in one place in her entire life. Enough to pay her overdue tuition bill with money left over for rent and maybe, God, maybe enough to buy groceries that weren't ramen noodles and day-old bread from the discount rack. There were credit cards too, platinum and black, the kind that didn't have spending limits. A driver's license for a Vincent Cross, 48 years old, with an address in a part of Seattle Elena had only seen from bus windows, the kind of neighborhood where houses had gates and gardens and security systems that cost more than cars. And business cards, elegant things with embossed lettering. Vincent Cross, private consultant, with a phone number and nothing else. Elena pulled her backpack onto the table and unzipped the front pocket where she kept her bills, the ones printed on different colored paper to indicate their urgency. Red for final notice. Yellow for second warning. White for the ones that hadn't escalated yet. The tuition bill was red, had been red for 2 weeks, the number at the bottom, $4, 200, might as well have been $4 million for all the chance she had of paying it. Her student loan had been denied. Her scholarship covered books but not tuition. She'd applied for 17 different grants and been rejected by every single one. This money, this impossible windfall, would solve everything. She could pay tuition, catch up on rent, maybe even cut back to 1 job instead of 2, and actually sleep more than 4 hours a night. Her hands moved without conscious thought, fingers touching the bills, feeling their crispness, imagining the weight of them in her bank account instead of this stranger's wallet. The memory came unbidden, sharp as broken glass. Her abuela's kitchen in the tiny apartment they'd shared before Elena left for college, the smell of café con leche, and the morning light slanting through curtains her abuela had sewn by hand. Mija, her grandmother had said, her weathered hands wrapped around Elena's smaller ones. Always earn your peace. Stolen bread tastes like poison, and you can never wash the taste away. You understand me? Never. Elena understood. God help her. She understood, but understanding didn't make the choice easier. Understanding didn't erase the exhaustion or the fear or the creeping certainty that she was going to fail, that she was going to work herself to death and still come up short, that all her dreams of becoming a doctor would die in a diner at 2 in the morning because she couldn't afford to keep them alive. She sat there for 20 minutes, the wallet open on the table, her overdue bills spread out like an indictment. Her phone was in her hand, the calculator app open, running the numbers again and again as if they might change. Rent, $850. Utilities, $120. Bus pass, $80. Tuition, $4,200. The minimum on her credit card, $180. Food, whatever was left, which was usually nothing. The cash in the wallet, $3,800. So close. Not quite enough, but so desperately close. Elena's finger hovered over the first bill, ready to slip it out, ready to take just what she needed and leave the rest. Surely the owner wouldn't miss it. Anyone who carried this much cash and left it in a diner booth probably had so much money that $3,800 was pocket change, meaningless, forgettable. But her abuela's voice wouldn't stop echoing in her head, and Elena's hands wouldn't cooperate with what her desperate mind was telling them to do. Instead, she found herself pulling out her phone, her real phone, not the calculator app, and photographing the business card. Her fingers shook as she typed the number into her contacts, saved it under wallet owner. And then, before she could talk herself out of it, before common sense could reassert itself, she pressed call. The phone rang once. Twice. 3 times. Elena was about to hang up, relief and disappointment warring in her chest, when a voice answered. Deep. Measured. The kind of voice that didn't need to raise itself to command attention. You have something of mine. Not a question. A statement of fact, delivered with the certainty of someone who always knew where his possessions were, even when they weren't in his possession. Elena's mouth went dry. Yes. I think so. I found a wallet in my diner. In booth 7. The name on the license is Vincent Cross, and I wanted to return it. Silence stretched across the line, long enough that Elena checked to make sure the call hadn't dropped. When Vincent Cross spoke again, his voice had shifted, become something that made the hair on Elena's arms stand up. How much is inside? The question was a trap. Elena could feel it, the way you could feel a storm coming before the first drop of rain. This was a test, and somehow, impossibly, her answer mattered more than she could understand. I didn't count it, Elena said, and it was technically true. She'd stopped counting after reaching $3,800, too afraid to know if there was more. That's not mine to count. I just want to return it to you. Another pause, this one shorter but weighted with assessment. Elena could almost feel this Vincent Cross reading her through the phone line, measuring her worth in the spaces between her words. What's the address? Elena rattled off the diner's location, her voice steadier than she felt. Stay there. Someone will come within the hour. And Miss Martinez. Elena Martinez. Miss Martinez. Thank you for your honesty. It's a rare quality these days. The line went dead. Elena sat alone in the empty diner, the wallet still on the table, her heart hammering against her ribs like it was trying to escape. She'd done the right thing. She'd called. She was returning it. So, why did she feel like she'd just made the biggest mistake of her life? 47 minutes later, Elena had been watching the clock, unable to focus on anything else. A black Mercedes pulled up outside Rosa's diner, so out of place in this neighborhood that it might as well have been a spaceship. The man who emerged was tall, built like he spent serious time in a gym, wearing a suit that probably cost more than Elena's yearly salary. He moved with the fluid confidence of someone who'd never been told no in his life, someone who didn't ask for things because he took them. The bell above the door chimed as he entered, and Elena stood from booth 7 on legs that felt like water. The man, Marcus, she'd learn later, though he didn't introduce himself, walked straight to her, his eyes finding the wallet on the table before they found her face. That's it. His voice matched his appearance. No nonsense. Direct, mildly threatening without even trying. Yes. Everything's inside. I didn't take anything. Marcus picked up the wallet with hands that were scarred across the knuckles, the kind of scars that came from hitting hard things repeatedly. He opened it methodically, counting the cash right there in front of her, making sure she watched him do it. $3,800, exactly. He checked the credit cards, the license, and the business cards. Satisfied, he pulled out his phone and made a call. It's Marcus. I've got it. Everything's here. Yeah, she's clean. Understood. He ended the call and looked at Elena properly for the first time, really looked at her, taking in the exhaustion in her eyes, the anatomy textbook on the counter, the grease-stained apron she still wore, the name tag that said, Elena, in cheerful letters that contradicted everything about the situation. Why didn't you take it? The question wasn't accusatory. It was genuinely curious, as if he'd never encountered someone who wouldn't steal money if given the chance. Because it's not mine, Elena said simply, because what other answer was there? Marcus studied her for another long moment, then reached into his jacket. Elena flinched. She couldn't help it, but he only pulled out an envelope. He counted out 40 $100 bills and placed them on the counter with deliberate precision. $4,000. Mr. Cross appreciates your honesty. I don't need. Elena's protest died in her throat because she did need it desperately, and they both knew it. Marcus placed a phone next to the money. Not a smartphone, but a simple burner phone, the kind people used in movies when they didn't want to be traced. Mr. Cross will call you. Keep this phone charged. Always. Don't lose it. Don't turn it off. Don't give the number to anyone. Wait, I don't understand. But Marcus was already walking toward the door, the wallet secured in his jacket pocket. He paused at the threshold, his hand on the door. You will. Then he was gone, the Mercedes pulling away from the curb and disappearing into the pre-dawn darkness like it had never existed. Elena stood in the empty diner, staring at $4,000 in cash and a burner phone, and she knew with absolute certainty that her life had just changed in ways she couldn't begin to comprehend. She took the money. Of course she took the money. What else could she do? Leave it on the counter for Rosa to find in the morning? Throw it away? She'd done the right thing by returning the wallet. Surely this was just a reward, a thank you, nothing more sinister than gratitude from someone who had so much that $4,000 was meaningless. But Elena charged the phone that night, and she kept it in her pocket every day that followed, and she never turned it off. The next 3 weeks were the strangest of Elena's life. She paid her tuition bill, the relief so profound she cried in the bursar's office, tears she blamed on stress and exhaustion when the clerk asked if she was okay. She caught up on rent, bought groceries that included actual vegetables and protein, even splurged on new shoes to replace the ones with holes worn through the soles. She should have felt lighter, unburdened, but instead a different weight settled over her shoulders. She started noticing things. A black car, not Marcus's Mercedes, but similar, that seemed to be on the street outside her apartment more often than coincidence would explain. A man in a coffee shop who didn't order anything but sat with a newspaper for an hour, his eyes tracking her over the pages. A woman at the bus stop who got off at the same stop as Elena 3 days in a row, even though Elena deliberately changed her route twice to test if she was being paranoid. She wasn't being paranoid. Elena changed everything. She took different buses to school and work. She varied her schedule, leaving at different times, taking roundabout routes. She kept the burner phone charged obsessively, checking it every 20 minutes even though it never rang, never showed messages, never gave any indication that anyone was on the other end waiting. She slept poorly, jumping at sounds, triple-checking her locks, her curtains drawn tight against watching eyes she couldn't confirm but couldn't deny. Her roommate, Sophie, noticed. "You've been weird lately. Like, weirder than normal weird. Final stress." Something like that. Elena lied because what was she supposed to say? "I returned a wallet to someone who might be a criminal, and now I think I'm being watched?" 3 weeks became 4. The surveillance, if it was surveillance and not her paranoid imagination, continued. But nothing else happened. No phone calls. No visits. No demands. Just the constant sensation of being observed, assessed, measured against some unknown standard. Elena started to relax incrementally. Maybe it really had just been a reward. Maybe Vincent Cross had checked her out to make sure she wasn't going to try to extort him or something, and once satisfied, he'd moved on with his life. Maybe the phone was just a test of her reliability, and she'd passed by keeping it charged and ready. Maybe this would just fade away, a strange interlude in her life that would eventually become a weird story she told at parties. She was almost convinced of this narrative when the phone rang. It happened during her dinner shift at Rose's, 5 weeks and 2 days after the night she'd found the wallet. Elena felt the vibration in her pocket, the unfamiliar pattern. This phone only had one ringtone, a simple buzz, and her heart stopped. Actually stopped, or felt like it did, skipping beats before lurching back into rhythm. She grabbed the phone with shaking hands, nearly dropping it, and answered without thinking. "Hello. Tomorrow, 2 p.m. Pier 63, Warehouse 8C. Come alone." Vincent Cross's voice was exactly as she remembered it. Calm, controlled, expecting obedience. "I don't understand." "Yes, you do. 2 p.m. Don't be late, Miss Martinez." The line went dead. Elena stood in the middle of Rose's diner, a coffee pot in one hand and a phone in the other, while the world tilted sideways and her carefully constructed hope that this was overshadowed into pieces at her feet. She barely slept that night. She called in sick to both her jobs the next day, something she never did, because missing work meant missing money, and she didn't have money to miss. But she couldn't focus, couldn't function, couldn't think about anything except the address Vincent Cross had given her and the command to come alone. If you're feeling the tension building and wondering whether Elena should run or show up at that warehouse, drop a comment below. Would you go? Would you stay? Because the choice she makes next defines everything that follows, and trust me, you need to hear what happens when she walks through that warehouse door. Pier 63 was in the industrial district, a part of Seattle's waterfront that tourists never saw, where shipping containers stacked like giants' toys and warehouses squatted in rusting rows. Elena took the bus as close as she could get, then walked the last 15 minutes, her sneakers crunching on gravel and broken pavement. The address Vincent had given her led to a warehouse that looked abandoned, its windows dark, its loading bay door pulled shut, no signs of life or activity. But the smaller door on the side was unlocked. Elena pushed it open, stepping from afternoon sunlight into darkness that smelled of motor oil, rust, and something else, expensive cologne, out of place in this industrial decay. Her eyes adjusted slowly, revealing a vast open space filled with shadows and the geometric shapes of covered equipment. "You're punctual." Another rare quality. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, echoing off concrete walls and high ceilings. Then Vincent Cross stepped from behind a support pillar, and Elena saw him properly for the first time. He was older than his license photo suggested, with silver threading through dark hair, lines around his eyes that spoke of years spent reading people and situations. He wore a tailored suit, charcoal gray, with a black shirt and no tie, the kind of carefully calibrated casualness that only came from serious money and serious taste. But it was his eyes that trapped her, dark, intelligent, assessing her with an intensity that made her feel transparent, like he could read every thought she'd ever had just by looking at her. Two men flanked him, both built like Marcus, both watching Elena with the dead-eyed focus of people who'd done terrible things and would do them again without hesitation. "Mr. Cross," Elena managed, her voice steadier than she felt. "I don't understand why I'm here." "Don't you?" Vincent walked closer, his movements unhurried, controlled. He stopped about 10 feet away, maintaining distance but commanding the space between them. "You returned something valuable to me. Most people wouldn't have. Most people would have kept the money, maybe run a few cards before I could cancel them, taken what they could get. But you called. At 2:30 in the morning, exhausted, probably desperate for money. You called to return what wasn't yours. That's just basic decency." "No," Vincent interrupted, his voice sharp enough to cut. "Basic decency is rare, Miss Martinez. Especially in desperate people. Especially in this city. I've been watching you since that night. I know you work 2 jobs. I know you study 60 hours a week. I know your student loans were denied and your scholarship barely covers your books. I know you eat ramen noodles for dinner 5 nights a week, and you haven't bought new clothes in 2 years. I know you're drowning, and yet when I put a life preserver in front of you, you didn't grab it. You did the right thing." The words should have been comforting, but they weren't. They were terrifying. Vincent Cross knew everything about her, had been watching her, studying her, and she hadn't known, hadn't suspected the depth of his attention. "That was a test," Elena said slowly, understanding crystallizing. "The wallet. You left it on purpose." "I did." "Why?" Vincent smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Because I need people I can trust, Miss Martinez. People who don't take what isn't theirs. People who keep their word. People who understand loyalty." He paused, letting the words sink in. "And I think you're that kind of person. I think you're exactly what I need." "I don't understand what you're offering." "Yes, you do." Vincent pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket, thin and elegant. He held it but didn't offer it yet. "Inside this envelope is a full scholarship to the accelerated medical program at Seattle Pacific. Tuition, fees, books, everything. Additionally, you'll receive a monthly stipend of $3,000 for living expenses. Your student debt, all of it will be cleared. You'll have a new apartment, fully furnished, in a safe neighborhood. You'll be able to focus entirely on your studies without working, without stress, without fear of failing because you can't afford to continue." Elena's breath caught. Everything he was offering was everything she'd dreamed of, the kind of miracle that didn't happen to people like her. "What's the price?" "Because there was always a price." "Complete loyalty," Vincent said simply. "When I call, you answer. When I need your medical skills, you provide them. You ask no questions about who needs treatment or how they were injured. You involve no authorities, no hospitals, no official records. You treat my people with the same skill and discretion you'd show a president. And you never, ever try to leave." The warehouse felt colder. Elena wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly aware of how isolated this location was, how alone she was, how easily she could disappear and no one would know where to look. "You want me to be your doctor. Your personal doctor." "Eventually," Vincent agreed. "Right now, you're a nursing student. But I'm investing in your future because I see potential. I see someone who can be shaped, trained, trusted. In 4 years, you'll be a fully licensed physician and you'll be mine." "What if I say no?" Vincent's smile widened slightly. "Then you walk out of here with my thanks for returning my wallet, and we never speak again. You'll go back to your 2 jobs and your crushing debt and your nightly prayers that you can somehow make it through another semester. I don't force people, Miss Martinez. I offer opportunities. What people do with those opportunities is their choice." But it wasn't really a choice, and they both knew it. Vincent Cross had researched her, studied her, identified every pressure point in her life. He was offering her a way out of drowning, and the alternative was to keep drowning and hope she didn't eventually go under. How do I know you'll keep your word? Elena asked. Because I always keep my word. Ask anyone who works for me. I pay what I promise. I protect my people, and I demand in return only loyalty and discretion. You'll never want for anything, Miss Martinez. You'll become the doctor you've dreamed of being. You'll help people, save lives, use your skills for good. The only difference is that some of those people will be mine, and you won't ask questions about how they got hurt. People you've hurt, Elena said quietly. Vincent didn't deny it. I solve problems, Miss Martinez. Sometimes those problems involve people who don't want their problems solved. Sometimes people get hurt. That's the nature of my business. Your role isn't to judge. Your role is to heal. Isn't that what doctors do? Heal without judging. The Hippocratic Oath says first, do no harm. And you won't be doing harm. You'll be preventing it. You'll be saving lives that would otherwise be lost because those people can't go to hospitals, can't involve authorities. You'll be a force for good in a complicated world. Vincent extended the envelope. 48 hours, Miss Martinez. Think about it. Pray about it if that helps. Talk to your grandmother. Elena's eyes widened and Vincent nodded. Yes, I know about her too. Talk to anyone you trust, though I'd advise against mentioning my name or the specific details. When you've decided, call the number you already have. If you accept, say yes. If you decline, say no. Either way, you'll have your answer, and so will I. Elena took the envelope with numb fingers. Vincent nodded once, sharp and final, and then he walked past her toward the door, his bodyguards falling in behind him. He paused at the threshold, his back to her. For what it's worth, Miss Martinez, I hope you say yes. You have a gift for seeing people, for understanding them. That night at the diner, you looked at me, not Marcus me. I was in booth 7. I'm the businessman who left you a 20% tip. I watched you count it, watched you pocket it with the kind of gratitude most people reserve for miracles. You smiled at me, genuinely smiled, because I'd been kind. Most people in my position aren't kind. Most people in your position have lost the ability to appreciate kindness. But you haven't. You're still good, Miss Martinez. Still whole. I'd like to keep you that way. Then he was gone, and Elena was alone in an empty warehouse, holding an envelope that contained her future, though she didn't know yet what kind of future it would be. She didn't go home immediately. Instead, she walked along the waterfront, the envelope burning in her bag, her mind racing through impossible calculations. The wind off Puget Sound was cold, carrying the salt smell of the sea and the distant cries of gulls, and Elena walked until her feet hurt and her thoughts began to slow. That night, she sat in her cramped apartment and pulled out every bill she had, spread them across her kitchen table in neat rows of red and yellow and white. She opened her laptop and looked at her bank account, $847. She looked at her credit card balance, $3,200. She calculated how many months she could survive at her current rate of work and spending, factoring in tuition and rent and food and transportation. The answer was 3 months. Maybe 4 if she stopped eating anything except ramen and gave up the bus pass to walk everywhere. Then she'd have to drop out of nursing school, move back in with her grandmother in California, give up on her dreams of becoming a doctor. Elena pulled out her phone, her regular phone, not the burner, and called her abuela. The phone rang 4 times before her grandmother's familiar voice answered, rough with sleep, but warming instantly with love. Mija? It's late. Are you okay? Abuela, Elena said, and her voice cracked. If someone offered you everything you ever wanted, but the price was doing something you weren't sure was right, what would you do? Her grandmother was quiet for a long moment. Elena could hear her moving, imagined her sitting up in bed, turning on the light, giving this question the serious attention it deserved. That depends, Mija. Is the thing they want you to do evil?
No.
Not evil. Just complicated. Morally gray. Will it hurt innocent people?
No.
Actually, it might help people. But the people I'd be helping aren't innocent. Another pause. Elena, Mija, I'm old. I've seen a lot of life. And I've learned that the world isn't as simple as we want it to be when we're young. Sometimes good people do complicated things for complicated reasons. Sometimes the right choice isn't the easy choice, and the easy choice isn't the right one. Her grandmother sighed. I told you once that stolen bread tastes like poison. I still believe that. But if someone offers you bread, even if they're not a saint, even if they want something in return, that's not stealing, Mija. That's a transaction. The question isn't whether they're good or bad. The question is whether you can live with what they're asking you to do. Can you look at yourself in the mirror afterward?
Can you sleep at night?
Can you still be the Elena I raised? Or will this change who you are in ways you can't undo? Elena closed her eyes, tears sliding down her cheeks. I don't know, Abuela. Then don't decide tonight.
Pray on it. Sleep on it.
Trust your heart, Mija. You've always had a good heart. It won't lead you wrong. They talked for another 20 minutes about nothing, her grandmother's garden, the neighbor's new cat, the weather in California, and when Elena hung up, she felt calmer but no closer to a decision. The next day, she went to work at Rose's diner like normal. She served tables, poured coffee, studied during the slow hours. She went to her classes at the university, took notes, participated in discussions. She acted like everything was normal, like she wasn't carrying an envelope that could change her entire life in her bag. But that night, alone in her apartment, Elena opened the envelope. Inside was exactly what Vincent had promised, a letter of acceptance to Seattle Pacific's accelerated medical program, full scholarship, all fees waived. A bank statement showing an account in her name with $75,000 already deposited. Keys to an apartment in Capitol Hill, one of Seattle's safe, walkable neighborhoods. A phone number to call when she'd made her decision. Elena spread it all out on her bed and looked at it for a long time. Then she looked at her anatomy textbook, worn and highlighted, representing hundreds of hours of study and thousands of dollars of student loan debt. She looked at her work uniform from Rose's diner, stained and tired. She looked at her hands, the hands she wanted to use to heal people, to save lives, to make a difference. Vincent Cross was offering her the means to do that. Yes, some of the people she'd treat would be criminals. Yes, she'd be complicit in a world she didn't fully understand. But she'd also be a doctor. She'd have the skills and the resources to save lives. Wasn't that what mattered most? Elena picked up the burner phone. The one Marcus had given her 5 weeks ago. The one she'd kept charged and ready. She dialed the number from the envelope, and Vincent Cross answered on the first ring. Miss Martinez. Have you decided? Elena took a deep breath, thought of her grandmother's words about transactions and choices, and the person you can see in the mirror. She thought of her dreams, her debts, her exhaustion. She thought of Booth 7 and a businessman who'd left a generous tip and watched her count it with gratitude. Yes, Elena said. I accept. Good. Vincent's satisfaction was audible. The apartment keys are ready. Move in this weekend. Your classes start Monday. Rules are simple and I won't repeat them. You don't ask names. You don't ask how injuries happened. You don't call the police. You don't go to hospitals. You don't run. Most importantly, you don't think about backing out. Once you're in, Miss Martinez, you're in. Do you understand? I understand. Welcome to your new life, Dr. Martinez. The line went dead. Elena sat on her bed, the phone in her hand, and felt the weight of her choice settle over her like a shroud. She'd done it. She'd made her decision. There was no going back now. The next morning, her bank account showed $75,000. By afternoon, she'd given notice at both her jobs, her manager surprised but understanding when she explained she'd received a full scholarship. By evening, she'd signed a lease termination agreement with her landlord. By Sunday, she'd moved into a furnished 2-bedroom apartment in Capitol Hill with hardwood floors, stainless steel appliances, and windows that looked out over the city like a promise. Monday, she started classes. The accelerated program was intense, designed for students who already had medical backgrounds or exceptional aptitude. Elena threw herself into it with desperate focus, studying 12, 14, 16 hours a day, as if by excelling, she could somehow justify her choice, validate her decision, prove she deserved this opportunity despite how she'd gotten it. For months passed. Elena's life transformed. She had money for food, for clothes, for books. She slept in a real bed in a safe neighborhood. She made friends in her program, studied in coffee shops instead of greasy diners, walked to class instead of taking overcrowded buses. She was becoming the person she'd always wanted to be, a medical student with a future, someone who could help people, save lives, make a difference. And the burner phone never rang. Elena checked it obsessively for the first month, then weekly, then occasionally. It stayed charged, stayed silent, stayed ready. But no calls came. No texts. No demands. It was as if Vincent Cross had given her this gift and disappeared, as if the price she'd agreed to pay might never come due. Elena began to wonder if maybe it wouldn't. Maybe Vincent had merely wanted to help someone, to use his resources for good in his own complicated way. Maybe he'd tested her, found her worthy, and decided supporting her education was enough. Maybe she'd get her degree without ever having to treat anyone in his organization. She was almost starting to believe this when the phone rang. It was 3 a.m, dead winter, rain hammering against Elena's windows. She'd been asleep, dreaming of anatomy exams and arterial systems, when the unfamiliar vibration jolted her awake. She grabbed the phone with her heart already racing, knowing before she answered what this meant. Yes. Her voice was hoarse with sleep. I need you.
Now.
Vincent's voice was clipped, urgent in a way it hadn't been before. He rattled off an address outside the city, somewhere in the suburbs where Seattle became forests and estates. A car will be there in 8 minutes. Bring nothing. Say nothing. Come. What? 8 minutes, Dr. Martinez. The line went dead. Elena was already moving, pulling on jeans and a sweater, shoving her feet into shoes. She had a medical kit. Vincent had sent it months ago, a professional emergency kit that she'd opened once, examined, and stored in her closet, trying not to think about when she might need it. She grabbed it now, her hands shaking, her mind racing. 7 minutes later, she was standing outside her building when a black SUV pulled up, Marcus in the driver's seat. He didn't speak, just jerked his head toward the passenger side. Elena climbed in, the medical kit on her lap, and they drove into the rainy night. The address was a mansion, gated and set back from the road, surrounded by tall firs that made it invisible from the street. Marcus drove up the winding driveway and stopped at a side entrance. He led Elena inside, down a hallway, down a flight of stairs, through a door that opened onto something she never expected to see, a fully equipped operating room, underground, hidden, ready for exactly this moment. And there, on the surgical table, was a man bleeding out. Thomas Reed was 52 according to the medical chart that didn't exist, though Elena wouldn't learn his name until later. Right now, he was just a patient, gray-haired, unconscious, his chest rising and falling in shallow, desperate gasps. Blood soaked through the sheets beneath him, pooling on the floor, the metallic smell of it thick in the air. Someone had already cut away his shirt, revealing the wound. A gunshot entry point just below his left collarbone, dark and weeping, the kind of injury that meant internal damage, possibly catastrophic. Vincent Cross stood in the corner of the room, his suit jacket discarded, his shirt sleeves rolled up. 2 armed men flanked the door. And everyone was looking at Elena. Dr. Martinez, Vincent said, his voice cutting through her shock like a scalpel. Thomas has been shot. The bullet is still inside, likely lodged near or in his lung. He's been bleeding for 40 minutes. He's going to die if you don't save him. So save him. Elena's medical training warred with her terror. She'd assisted in surgeries during her clinical rotations. She'd studied trauma procedures. She'd practiced on cadavers and simulations. But she'd never been the primary surgeon, never been alone with a dying patient, never had someone's life depend entirely on her still-developing skills. I'm not a surgeon, Elena said, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm a second-year medical student. I can't. You can, Vincent interrupted, moving closer but not touching her, not crowding her. You have the knowledge. You have the equipment. You have the training. What you don't have is a choice, Dr. Martinez. Thomas is my oldest friend, my most trusted advisor. He's been with me for 20 years. And he's dying. So you're going to stop that from happening. You're going to remember everything you've learned, and you're going to put it to use, and you're going to save his life. The calm certainty in Vincent's voice, the absolute expectation of success, somehow steadied Elena more than any reassurance could have. She looked at Thomas again, saw his lips going blue, heard the wet, rattling sound of his breathing, and something in her shifted. The fear didn't disappear, but it moved aside, making room for the part of her that had spent 4 months learning how to save lives. I need blood, Elena said, her voice stronger. His type. O negative. Universal donor. Already here. Marcus wheeled over a portable cooler, opened it to reveal bags of blood, properly stored, ready for transfusion. Anesthesia. I can't operate while he's local only. He's too unstable for general. You'll have to work with him semi-conscious. Elena's hands moved automatically now, washing at the surgical sink, pulling on gloves, prepping her instruments. She'd done this 100 times in simulation, in practice, in observation. Never alone. Never for real. Never with armed men watching her and a crime boss expecting miracles. She positioned herself over Thomas, examined the wound more closely. Entry point just below the left clavicle, trajectory angled downward and medially. The bullet had probably nicked or punctured the lung, possibly damaged the subclavian artery. He was bleeding internally, his chest cavity filling with blood, his lung collapsing. I need to intubate him first, Elena said, and Marcus handed her the equipment before she could finish the sentence. They'd prepared for this, stocked this room with everything a surgeon might need. Vincent had planned for this moment, had known it would come eventually, had prepared his underground operating room and his captive doctor. Elena worked with hands that shook at first but steadied as training took over. She intubated Thomas, established the airway, connected him to the ventilator. His oxygen saturation improved marginally, not enough but better than it had been. She inserted in 4-line, started the first transfusion, watched the blood flow into his body to replace what he'd lost. Then came the hard part. I'm going to make an incision, Elena announced, not sure if she was talking to Thomas, to Vincent, to herself. Accessing the chest cavity to find the bullet and repair the damage. This is going to hurt. Even with local anesthetic, you're going to feel it. You need to stay as still as possible. Thomas's eyes fluttered open, glazed with pain and blood loss but aware enough to nod fractionally. Elena picked up the scalpel. The next 90 minutes existed outside of time. Elena made the incision, extended it, used a rib spreader to access Thomas's chest cavity. Blood welled up immediately, obscuring her view, and she had to suction constantly while working. She found the bullet lodged against the third rib, having punctured the upper lobe of his left lung and nicked, but not severed. Thank God. The subclavian artery. She removed the bullet first, dropped it into a metal tray, where it clinked with the sound of mortality. Then came the delicate work of repairing the lung, closing the puncture, checking for other damage. Her hands moved with a precision she didn't know she possessed, guided by months of study and years of determination, and the desperate need to prove Vincent right, to prove she could do this, to prove her choice hadn't been for nothing. Thomas moaned occasionally, his body trying to move, to escape the pain. One of the armed guards had to hold his shoulders still. Marcus monitored vitals, calling out blood pressure and heart rate and oxygen saturation. Vincent never moved from his corner, never spoke, his dark eyes tracking every movement Elena made. She repaired the arterial nick with sutures so small they were barely visible. She sealed the lung puncture, checked for air leaks, monitored the chest tube she'd inserted to drain accumulated blood. She closed the rib spreader, sutured the incision in layers, muscle, fascia, skin, each stitch precise and careful. Finally, after what felt like both hours and seconds, Elena stepped back. Thomas's vitals were stabilizing. His oxygen saturation was climbing. His breathing, supported by the ventilator, was becoming more regular. The bleeding had stopped. He needs antibiotics, Elena heard herself saying, her voice distant and strange. To prevent infection. and he needs to be monitored constantly for the next 48 hours. The lung could collapse again. He could develop a pneumothorax. He's going to live? Vincent's question cut through her clinical recitation. Elena looked at Thomas, at the monitors showing steadier vital signs, at the closed incision that would scar but would heal.
Yes.
If he doesn't develop complications, if he rests, if he follows post-operative care instructions, yes, he's going to live. Vincent moved then, crossing the room in 3 long strides. He stopped in front of Elena, and for one terrible moment, she thought he might embrace her, might cross some professional line that would make everything worse. Instead, he held out his hand. "Thank you, Dr. Martinez." Elena looked down at her hands, still gloved, still covered in Thomas's blood. She was shaking again now that the surgery was over, adrenaline draining away and leaving exhaustion in its wake. She pulled off the gloves, dropped them in the biohazard bin, and shook Vincent's hand with fingers that trembled. "You did well," Vincent said quietly. "Better than well. You saved his life under impossible circumstances. You should be proud." But Elena didn't feel proud. She felt hollowed out, scraped raw, fundamentally altered in ways she couldn't name. She'd just performed surgery on a man who'd been shot, probably in some criminal altercation, definitely in circumstances that would normally require police involvement and official investigation. She'd used her skills, her hard-earned, desperately wanted skills, to help someone who existed outside the law. Vincent reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope, similar to the one he'd given her in the warehouse, but thinner. He pressed it into her hand. $25,000. Bonus for exceptional work under pressure. You've earned my trust, Elena. That's worth more than money, but money helps too. Elena stared at the envelope, unable to process what it meant, what any of this meant. I told you once that I always repay my debts, Vincent continued. Tonight you indebted me. I won't forget that. No one who works for me will forget that. You're under my protection now, completely and permanently. Do you understand what that means? Elena shook her head mutely. It means you're safe. It means you're valued. It means as long as you remain loyal to me, I remain loyal to you. And my loyalty is absolute. Vincent stepped back, gestured toward Marcus. Take her home. Make sure she gets inside safely. Tomorrow, send flowers to her apartment, something expensive, something that says thank you. And Elena? She looked up at him, this man who'd tested her with a wallet and trapped her with generosity and now owned her in ways she was only beginning to understand. Get some sleep. You've earned it. Marcus drove her home in silence, the city passing outside the windows in streaks of light and shadow. Rain still fell, washing the streets, washing away evidence of the night, washing away the person Elena had been before she'd cut into Thomas Reed's chest and pulled him back from death. She made it inside her apartment, set the envelope on the kitchen counter without opening it, and walked straight to the bathroom. She turned on the shower fully clothed, just like she'd imagined months ago, and sat under the spray until the water ran cold and her skin was numb. When she finally emerged, wrapped in towels and shaking with cold and shock, she opened the envelope. $25,000, exactly as Vincent had said. She counted it twice, then put it in her desk drawer next to the acceptance letter that had started all of this. Elena looked at her hands, the hands that had saved a life tonight, the hands that had sutures and sealed and repaired. They were steady now, competent, skilled. They were a surgeon's hands, even if she wasn't officially a surgeon yet. They were also hands that had helped a criminal, that had enabled violence by cleaning up its aftermath, that had crossed a line she could never uncross. Elena went to bed as dawn broke over Seattle, but she didn't sleep. She stared at the ceiling and thought about her grandmother's question. Can you look at yourself in the mirror afterward?
She didn't know yet.
She'd have to wait and see. If you're still watching and your heart is racing like Elena's, do me a solid, subscribe to this channel. Because her story doesn't end here. In fact, it's barely begun. And you'll want to know what happens when you owe a debt to someone like Vincent Cross. Trust me on that. 6 months passed. Elena finished her second year of medical school ranked first in her class. She moved through her rotations with quiet confidence, impressing her professors, earning respect from her peers. She lived in her nice apartment, studied in coffee shops, presented case studies at conferences. To anyone looking from the outside, she was exactly what she appeared to be, a brilliant medical student with a bright future ahead of her. But Elena had two phones now. Her regular phone for her normal life, classes, friends, family, the ordinary world where people didn't get shot and left to die. And the burner phone for Vincent's world, the one where calls came at 3 in the morning and questions weren't asked and cash appeared in envelopes for services rendered. The phone had rung 4 more times in those 6 months. Twice for knife wounds, one a slash forearm that needed 23 stitches, one a stab wound to the abdomen that had mercifully missed all major organs. Once for a compound fracture that Elena had set and casted in an apartment above a closed restaurant. Once for an overdose that she'd stabilized with naloxone and 4 fluids, bringing a young man back from the edge of death while his crying girlfriend watched from the doorway. Each time Elena went. Each time, she asked no questions. Each time, she used her skills to save lives that existed in shadows. Each time, Vincent's payment arrived the next day, never less than $15,000, sometimes as much as 30. Each time, Elena looked at herself in the mirror and recognized herself a little less. She tried talking to her grandmother once, obliquely, about compromises and choices, and whether the ends justified the means. Her abuela had listened, then said something that haunted Elena. Mija, every choice we make changes us. The question isn't whether you change. The question is whether you become someone you can still love. Elena didn't have an answer to that yet. On a Friday night in late spring, 6 months and 11 days after Thomas Reed's surgery, Elena was studying in her apartment when the burner phone rang. By now, she didn't jump anymore when it buzzed. She simply picked it up, already moving toward her closet where she kept the medical kit packed and ready. Yes, I have someone who needs you. Vincent's voice, familiar now in its calm authority. Not urgent this time. Standard follow-up. Can you come tomorrow afternoon? 2 p.m.? Yes. Same address as last time. Thank you, doctor. The line went dead, and Elena sat back down with her textbook on cardiology, picking up where she'd left off as if nothing had interrupted. This was her life now. This was who she'd become. The next afternoon, Marcus picked her up in the black Mercedes that had become as familiar as a taxi. He drove her to Vincent's estate, led her through the front entrance this time instead of the hidden basement door. The house was elegant, tastefully decorated, the kind of place that belonged in architecture magazines. Nothing about it suggested the violence that funded it. Vincent was in his study, standing by windows that overlooked gardens maintained by people Elena never saw. He turned when she entered, and for the first time since the warehouse, he smiled at her, genuinely smiled, with warmth that almost seemed real. Elena, thank you for coming. Thomas wanted to see you. He's been asking. Vincent led her through the house to a sunroom where Thomas Reed sat in a comfortable chair, reading a newspaper, a blanket across his lap despite the warm weather. He looked up when they entered, and his face transformed with recognition and something that might have been gratitude. Dr. Martinez. Thomas set aside the newspaper and extended his hand. Elena shook it, professional and careful. I never got to thank you properly. For saving my life. For giving me more time with my family. You're welcome, Elena said, because what else could she say? How are you feeling? Any pain? Difficulty breathing? They talked for 20 minutes about his recovery, his lung function, the scar tissue that was forming properly. Elena examined him briefly, checked his breathing, his range of motion. He was healing perfectly, exactly as she'd hoped when she'd closed that incision in the underground operating room. You have a gift, Thomas said as Elena packed away her stethoscope. Vincent told me you're still a student. You could have let me die.
You could have panicked, made mistakes.
But you didn't. You were professional, skilled, calm. That's rare, Dr. Martinez. Don't ever lose that. After the examination, Vincent walked Elena back through the house. At the front entrance, he stopped. I have someone who needs you, Vincent said. Different kind of case. Not emergency medicine this time. Elena waited, knowing there was more. My sister's daughter, my niece, is 16. She wants to be a doctor like you. She's brilliant, driven, but she doesn't have anyone in the medical field to mentor her. I was hoping you might be willing to meet with her occasionally, answer questions, maybe let her shadow you sometimes if your program allows. I'd pay you for your time, of course. The request was so normal, so innocent, that Elena almost laughed. You don't have to pay me to mentor a teenager interested in medicine. I'd be happy to meet her. Vincent's smile widened.
See?
This is why I chose you, Elena. You're still good, still kind, still the person who returned a wallet at 2 a.m.
He paused.
I told you once that I always repay my debts. You saved Thomas's life. You've helped my people when they needed it most. You've never asked questions, never violated my trust, never tried to leave. That loyalty is valuable to me. Invaluable, actually. I keep my word, Elena said simply. I know. That's why you're here. Vincent pulled out his phone, showed Elena a photo, a young girl with dark hair and Vincent's eyes, smiling at the camera. Her name is Isabella. She'll be so excited to meet you. Elena looked at the photo and saw herself at 16, desperate and dreaming and so certain that hard work and goodness would be enough to carry her through. She wondered if Isabella knew what her uncle did, what kind of money funded her life. She wondered if it mattered. I'll call her this week, Elena promised. As Marcus drove her home, Elena watched the city pass outside the window and thought about the girl in the photo, about mentorship and influence and the weight of example. She thought about her grandmother's voice asking if she could still love the person she was becoming. The answer, Elena realized, was complicated. She'd saved lives that would have been lost. She'd used her skills for good, even if that good came wrapped in moral ambiguity. She'd achieved her dreams, even if the price was higher than she'd imagined. She was Dr. Martinez now, or would be soon enough. She was skilled, competent, trusted. She was under Vincent Cross's protection, which meant she was safe in ways most people never experienced. She was also trapped, owned, complicit. She'd crossed lines she couldn't uncross, made choices she couldn't unmake. She'd saved a violent man so he could commit more violence. She'd enabled a criminal organization by cleaning up its casualties. But she'd also saved lives. That had to count for something, didn't it? Elena's phone buzzed, her regular phone this time. A text from one of her classmates, asking if she wanted to grab dinner and study for upcoming exams. Elena smiled and typed back a yes, grateful for the illusion of normalcy, for the pretense that she was just another medical student with an ordinary life. The black Mercedes pulled up to her building, and Marcus turned in his seat to look at her. Mr. Cross asked me to give you this. He handed her another envelope, thinner than the usual payment. Elena opened it and found a simple card with elegant handwriting. Thank you for agreeing to mentor Isabella. You're a good person, Elena. Don't let anyone, including yourself, convince you otherwise. VC. She tucked the card into her bag, grabbed her medical kit, and headed inside. She had dinner with friends to get ready for, exams to study for, a life to pretend was normal. Tomorrow, the burner phone might ring again. Or it might not. Either way, Elena would answer. Because this was who she was now. Dr. Martinez, healer of wounds, keeper of secrets, prisoner of her own ambition. She'd made her choice that night in Rose's diner when she'd returned a wallet instead of keeping the money. She'd made it again in the warehouse when she'd accepted Vincent's offer. She'd made it every time she'd answered the burner phone, every time she'd treated someone without asking questions, every time she'd cashed Vincent's generous checks. She was free to live her life, pursue her career, help people, save lives. She just wasn't free to leave. And somewhere in the last 6 months, Elena had stopped wanting to. She'd become what Vincent Cross had seen in her that night. Someone loyal, competent, trustworthy. Someone who kept their word, no matter the cost. Someone who understood that the world was complicated and morality was contextual, and sometimes good people did questionable things for reasons that made sense in the moment. She'd become his doctor, his investment, his creation. And as Elena stood in her nice apartment in her safe neighborhood, looking out over the city lights of Seattle, she realized the truth that Vincent had known from the beginning. Some debts can never be repaid. Some choices can never be undone. Some lines, once crossed, become the new border of who you are. Elena Martinez had returned a wallet 6 months and 11 days ago, choosing honesty over desperation, integrity over survival. That choice had saved her life and destroyed it simultaneously, had given her everything she wanted and taken away everything she was. She'd passed Vincent Cross's test. Now she'd spend the rest of her life paying for that passing grade. The burner phone sat on her counter, charged and ready, waiting for the next call that would inevitably come. Elena looked at it for a long moment, then turned away to get ready for dinner with friends who didn't know about the phone, about Vincent, about the underground operating room where she'd performed surgery on a dying criminal. This was her life now. Both of them. The student and the surgeon. The friend and the fixer. The dreamer and the accomplice. And Elena Martinez, who'd once been the type of person you'd smile at for no reason because of her personality, the kind who said amen to every prayer and believed in earning your peace through honest work, had learned the hardest lesson of all. Sometimes the price of your dreams is yourself, and you don't realize you've paid it until the receipt is already signed in blood. The city lights twinkled below like promises, like possibilities, like the dreams of everyone who'd ever come to Seattle hoping for something better. Elena had found something better. She just wasn't sure anymore if what she'd found was worth what she'd become. But the debt was eternal. The choice was made. The line was crossed. And Dr. Elena Martinez would answer when Vincent Cross called, because that's what loyalty meant, and loyalty was the only currency that mattered in the world she'd chosen to inhabit. Some debts can never be repaid. Elena was learning to live with that truth, one phone call at a time. If Elena's story moved you, challenged you, or made you think about the choices we make and the prices we pay, leave a comment telling me what choice you would have made in that diner at 2 a.m. Would you have returned the wallet? Would you have kept the money? Would you have accepted Vincent's offer? Your answer might surprise you. And while you're thinking about it, hit that subscribe button because stories like this, stories about real people making impossible choices, are what this channel is all about. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.